We have sound. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lunchtime Live. I am Leslie.
I'm Ed.
We don't know what we're doing.
Total beginners.
But we're beginners, but we're trying this out. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi, Heather. My YouTube guru is here, which is I'm fangirling a little bit.
Some fan support.
I'm thrilled. And also, I wanted to show you, Heather, that this purple here is for you. That's for you. That's inspired by you because you made this happen and you encouraged this. So thank you for that. So welcome to Lunchtime Live.
Thank you. Wow.
Hi, Ed. We just recorded a podcast, so we're very zingy.
We're jazzed up a little bit.
We're jazzed up. We were sitting listening to our opening animation, kind of having a little dance party. So we're ready to go.
Great musical choices, Leslie. Unbelievable.
Thank you so much. So all that music degree is going towards chill beats and fun tunes. That's a good use of it all. So welcome, everyone. I wanted to talk a little bit about today. We'll start things off, but feel free to write in the chat anything you guys want to chat about. But today we've been kind of talking this whole past week about self-compassion and what that looks like, what that means. And I kind of feel like the obvious question that we haven't actually asked yet is, how is self-compassion different than self-care?
Yeah.
Because that seems like the kind of thing we've been kind of dancing around.
Yes.
And so what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I think that's a great question because actually recently a couple of people have brought that question to me. And so here's my take on it.
Oh, good.
Self-compassion, we've been trying to keep within the broader topic of compassion in general, right? As it moves out into our compassion for one another, for the whole creation. So it's part of a very, very big theme. I like to think that self-care, in some ways, I think that the way that people think about self-care is mostly in terms of their physical, their emotional health. That's key. Self-compassion also, I think, goes a little bit deeper than that, and it asks, what's the state of our soul, right? Our innermost life, the place where we're, maybe the deepest, most vulnerable places of our lives. So I think it's maybe a question of depth. Also, I think that care can have a very kind of practical component to it. I've been learning that self-compassion is very much about self-understanding. So it has a kind of philosophical base as well. Self-care is part of all of that. I would just suggest that maybe self-compassion is looking at the sort of essential intangible of who we are. That's why we often use the word soul to describe that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then again, it's really about self-understanding. So maybe self-compassion is the bigger basket in which self-care finds a place.
Oh, I like that. It's like a strategy of self-compassion.
I think so.
Along with other ideas. So Ed and I were in a memorial service on Saturday together for a very special member of our community. His name is Bon Jasperson. And one thing that someone said about him that really stuck with me is that he was as good at forgiving himself as he was at forgiving others.
Yeah, I heard that too.
And it made me
think. Comment.
It was amazing. And it made me think about, yesterday you talked about the golden rule, and it made me think about this idea of flipping it. Because of course we talk about sort of do unto others, right? As you'd have them do unto you. So treat people with kindness, treat people with love, and be thoughtful. But it feels like for a lot of us, or myself, I'll just speak for myself, that it's almost harder to do unto yourself as you would do unto others. Because I can be really intentional about caring for other people.
Yes.
And that's sometimes a lot easier and speaking kindly to other people than it is to speak kindly to myself.
Right.
So it kind of ties into that idea of we were talking last week on the podcast, right? About how of treating yourself like you're somebody you love
Yeah.
You know,
Your own best friend.
Your own best friend. Right. Your own life partner. Turns out.
Who knew?
Who knew? You have to spend your whole life
Whoa.
with this person.
I'm living with this person all the time.
Oh, no. I better be nice.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a couple of things there. So the old saying, it's more blessed to give than to receive, is interesting because, of course, when we're giving, we're a little bit more in control.
Right.
So to receive means I might have to be vulnerable.
Right.
And I have to kind of open myself up to whatever it is that I am receiving. So that's part of it.
Yeah.
And so I love this idea that to flip it, to make sure we get the whole phrase, love your neighbor, okay, as you love yourself. That's really the defining part of it.
Right.
And it's just occurred to me recently, like no one ever sat me down and had a serious conversation with me, especially early on in my ministry, like, how are you going to do that? And because your answer to that may determine everything else that you're going to do. And your comment about our dear friend Bon is so apt, because clearly at some point along his life, he got it.
Yeah.
And he thought, okay, if I can figure that out first, then everything else will flow naturally. And it did. It did for him.
It really did. I want to take a second to say hi to some people in the comments. Hello, Josh. And he's saying hello to our friend Christmas Clatter. Just a shout out, just in general, to the Just Create More community who is showing up here in droves. And I'm so grateful for you all so much for coming. We've got so many friends here. And thanks, Susan.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Susie.
Susan. We love when our friends and family are here. We're so grateful for you all for coming.
Awesome.
And I would love to hear about what you guys think about this idea of self-compassion, right?
Yeah.
And self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of what does that mean to you? Like, we've been talking about this for kind of like a week now. Some of you might be new to this conversation. I think it also kind of ties into a conversation we were having in the Just Create More community. We were talking about like what the act of making content and like this kind of almost performative act is, and like how we sort of become comfortable doing this, you know? And I think it all kind of ties in together about just being sort of good with you.
Right.
Does that? It's kind of I'm pulling in some disparate ideas here.
You're doing great. I see the threads.
They're
all
coming together. We're weaving a tapestry.
I don't know what the weaving looks like yet, but it's
me neither.
Something's happening. Well, I think you're mentioning that that's a creative act. That's a creative process. And you've got this wonderful creative community that you've been telling me a lot about, and how inspiring it is and encouraging. So that gives you that added, right? That added oomph. Yeah. Now, we also want, in our understanding of self-compassion, to understand how we can get that group inside us. How can we be that for ourselves?
Yeah.
And I think one of the reasons why we don't think about this more is it actually feels self-indulgent. I think that, which is odd because we are a profoundly self-indulgent culture. And here we are actually afraid of being self-indulgent.
Right.
When maybe this is a good place where we should really give some added attention and care to ourselves.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So here's my long-range philosophy on this. We might be a lot less self-indulgent and self-obsessed as a culture if we understood what it really meant to love our neighbor as we love ourselves.
Oh.
If we really were grounded in a good understanding of what we need in order to be whole and healthy and well, given the very challenges that we all face in life, then we might not look for all of those things like wellness or encouragement where they really can't be provided.
Sure, that we're indulging in the things that really matter and make a difference in a positive way. I want to dive into the comments a little bit. We have Tanya saying, interesting how society has a saying that you are your own worst enemy, which is so counter to the self-compassion concept.
Great. Yeah,
right?
Great. When have you ever heard anyone say, I'm my own best friend?
Right.
I don't think I have heard that.
Why do I want to be my own worst enemy? Like,
Right.
how is that helping anything?
I found it's actually very easy to be my own worst enemy.
Yeah, that's the easy part, right? The hard part is the love.
Great comment from Tanya. That's
Absolutely.
so true.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
Heather says, I see self-care almost like maintenance. For self-compassion, I see it as being really intentional with the expectations I have for myself. And she says, maybe not intentional, more like aware of those expectations. So it's kind of, we have expectations, and we have like these ideas of things we want to do and achieve and accomplish, and that maybe through acknowledging them, but also encouraging them in ourselves.
Yes.
Heather said something recent. I mean, she's so many gems. But one thing she said recently was in hiring, she hired a personal trainer because she needed somebody like her for herself.
Oh, great.
When it came to fitness, because she's a coach and she's like this consummate encourager of people. Oh. And she's like, I need a me.
That's great.
Which I loved that.
Yeah. Well, it's great self-understanding, right? To know
so
that.
much.
And just to go back to that comment, I love the word maintenance, by the way. I was reading a book recently about sleep. And so what happens when we sleep? Why is it that we need a certain number of hours, basically? And the thought is because actually the brain has a way of cleansing itself over a certain period of hours. And people who are experimenting with this kind of intentional fasting, where the last thing you eat is at 7 o'clock, you give yourself a long fast. Because the body's not consuming anything during that time, it gives the brain actually a chance to really do a deep clean. I think that's maintenance, right? That's good for us. And we that's good self-care to give ourselves that time.
Yeah, William Hall sort of reflected that same idea. He says self-care feels like maintenance, small things to do to make yourself happy. Self-compassion seems like a discipline you need to appreciate who you are and appreciate what you've done. That appreciation seems like a really like clutch key idea. Yeah. And discipline. Tanya liking that idea of discipline.
Good word.
Julia says that hit her mommy guilt hard. The idea of being self-indulgent, right?
Yeah.
When society or that voice in your head or the things that are going on are saying you should be doing this whole list of things, right? That's coming from a thing. I had a great friend in grad school who said, don't should yourself.
Oh, yes.
Don't should yourself. Which is one of my favorite things I've heard over and over again. Marianne Debnar coming in hot with a question. How did Jesus practice self-compassion?
Oh,
she's tying it together.
She is tying it together beautifully.
I love it.
That's a question that I think at one point I probably would have answered by saying, not much, right? I think that what you see from start to finish, or beyond his life, is that he seems to be constantly pouring himself out. However, I've been thinking about this question related to Jesus because he seems like such an obvious compulsive giver all the time.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
However, take a look at the stories really, really carefully, and you see how much time he spends eating and drinking with other people. In fact, he's accused of being a drunkard and a glutton. How's that? So did some people see in him like spending a little too much time around,
judgy?
No kidding,
Jeez,
right?
people?
Give him some space.
If
He's
even
like
Jesus got judged for that, then we're probably okay, folks.
And he didn't care.
He
He just kept, so anyway, there are all those wonderful stories. We get some indications that he had some friends who were especially special to him, and he spent time with them. Occasionally, he withdrew from everybody to get some peace, some solitude. May have been more of an introvert than we recognized, needed to get out of the mainstream a little bit. So I think when you start looking at the stories, even in the stories where he's doing something for other people, you get the sense that there's something he's also getting out of it, that there's an aliveness in the encounter. So he's intentional about it. He seems to love to eat and drink with other people and spend time with other people. And maybe he just derived a lot of self-compassion from all of that.
Yeah. And the idea that he was modeling, right? Like Julia says, so she's showing her kids how to have that compassion for herself. And then she's modeling that for her sweet kiddos.
Yeah.
Our friend Nancy says, to Heather's point, maybe the saying sometimes need to be love yourself as you love your neighbor.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Which is how we were starting, exactly what we were thinking.
It's fun to flip things back and forth or paraphrase them.
Yeah.
And see if there's a different kind of nuance that you can get from.
You can find some interesting stuff in that, right? Christmas Clatter says, I would say that Christ's self-care would be the times he went away from the crowds and was alone.
Yeah.
And with a few close friends, also taking naps in the bottom of the boat. I love the nap. The nap cracked me up every time. But yeah, getting a lot of inspiration from that. Yeah, Tanya saying the same thing, that spending alone time reflecting in the desert and prayer and fasting, this idea of just like doing what you need to do.
Right.
I was actually, I'm going to tie, we're getting real meta, because we were recording a podcast just half an hour ago. I've already lost the book. It's over. It's a live stream. I can go away. On this book, Art and Faith by Makoto Fujimura, which is called A Theology of Making. So we just recorded our newest podcast for the week on it. And we were talking about making. Mm-hmm. And I had the epiphany about a month ago that I didn't have any hobbies. I feel like I'm always doing stuff, and I feel like I make a lot of stuff.
You're making constantly.
I'm making a lot, and I feel like musicians are particularly notorious for not having hobbies. When like the thing that you do for a living is like, you must have so much fun all day long, and you're like, yes, this is true. I do have fun all day long,
but it's
still work, right?
Yeah.
And I think this also ties into the idea that we were talking about with like content creators of, when you're creating and you're pouring so much of yourself and it's this wonderfully creative process, is that an act of self-compassion? Because you can still get burnt out by that, right? Because that's the thing that becomes your job. Mm-hmm. So I took up silversmithing.
Of course you did.
Of course I did. Okay. Like you do. And my wonderful husband keeps going, well, you could sell them. Which I appreciate, because he has great faith in my abilities, which I very much appreciate. But at the same time, I'm like, no, I want to just do a thing for the joy of doing the thing. This is how I became a pastry chef in a restaurant. I just wanted to bake. It ended up being a whole thing.
Just all by itself.
Create a monster.
Yeah.
But I think but to get to my point, which is that the doing for the joy of doing.
Yes.
And for the getting lost in a book, like we were saying before, getting lost in an activity where it's not like you're not doing with this a lot of like self criticism, right? That you can do just for the joy, so that sort of critical voice can take a break.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, amidst all these activities, that deeper question is, what kind of friend are we learning to be to ourselves? And I have mentioned to you and others recently, I've gone through periods of my time where I'm thinking, if someone could hear the chatter going on inside my head, they would say, you're not a very good friend to yourself. Like, what kind of friend is living in there anyway? Right. So I have found over time that is actually something that can be practiced. I feel like the response that I have to myself now is different. And I was sharing this with someone recently, and we were talking about how difficult it can be to manage those little inner voices sometimes. And now I just say to myself, to my own little inner friend, stop.
Yeah.
You had your moment.
Yeah.
You said the thing, and it's said. Yeah. Now it's time to move that in a different direction. And one of our partners here in this conversation, they used the word appreciate.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think about what value there is in taking time every once in a while to actually list the things that we appreciate about our work. And because it also gives you the confidence to say, look at that, I'm actually building this way of life.
Yeah.
And it feels great. And one thing kind of leads to the next. And that pleasure then overspills its boundaries.
Yeah.
And in a good way, and starts to infuse everything we do.
Absolutely. Shameless plug. If you want to hear us talk about this some more, last week's podcast was all about self-compassion.
Yes, indeed.
We're very thematic this week. I can't promise we're always going to be this thematic, but today we are.
It's an especially deep dive.
I love it. Oh, and this is so funny. William says Legos and puzzles are the ultimate just for the joy activity. Yes, they are.
Great.
Shout out to Lego, man. As far as I can tell, there's no way to trick myself into thinking that they are monetizable or a business venture. I love that.
Yeah. Just do it.
Oh my gosh, Lego is the best thing ever. It really is. And Lego, I hope you guys have been watching Lego Masters. I think it's on NBC or something.
Start.
You need to start. It is joyful.
So there's someone we both know who is a kind of a Lego master who just completed the Capitol building and the Empire State Building.
Did he?
Yeah.
That's exciting.
That's amazing. And they're huge.
They're big. Those are big. Those architecture ones are intense.
Lots of little tiny pieces, and they come out to something really fantastic.
I want to get into the Technics next.
Wow.
Those are
Amazing.
cool.
Yeah.
I feel like make moving stuff.
Fly away after you're done with them.
I have to say, I'm on the same boat with Tom because he says he loves it but never knows what to do with it after they're built. Same. May I suggest for all of our Lego friends out there, if you've made something that was just for the fun of making it, go up the stairs in your house and throw it.
Oh, gee.
I'm just saying, like, have as much fun with the destruction
reconfigure it
as the construction. I'm just throwing that out there. It's just a suggestion. I've got a case of the Mondays. Apparently I want to go full office space with the hammer on the fax machine. So I won't go there. How did we get to Lego? I love that. Lego and puzzles. And you were talking about puzzles. This is very thematic. We've been talking about puzzles a lot around here.
Yeah, so interesting that we get a comment about puzzles and Lego.
Yeah.
Yeah, puzzles have been great for practitioners of self-compassion because, in fact, I asked a group of children recently, what do you think about what is the value? And they mentioned it right away. It's like
they were so with it.
Calming presence. You lose yourself for a time. Like it's really difficult to be worried about something while you're finding the right piece, especially if you've got a 1,000-piece puzzle and 800 pieces are one color.
Right.
Right.
Oh, gosh.
It really does tend to kind of erase all the other things that are going on.
Yeah.
And as one of those children said, it gives you a sense of accomplishment. So at a time when we feel like things are very much out of control, there is still much over which we can exercise some oversight, right? A little bit of stewardship. And you create a puzzle and it's beautiful. And I just have an amazing puzzle maker in my house, Susan, my wife, who puts these together. They just look impossible at the beginning. But when they're done, they're so beautiful to see how it puts, and they're kind of educational. You get them on themes, and it's really something to see them coming together. I
like it. So there's this, I'm going to pull it back to self-compassion, not that we've gone very far. But you were telling me about this idea. I'm going to butcher the word. What's the Japanese word?
The word, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but misogi.
Misogi. So what is misogi?
So that's a very different way of looking at self-compassion. So I think when we think about self-compassion, we think about appreciation and bolstering our spirits and doing things that are mostly within our comfort zones. Turns out that sometimes we can go outside our comfort zones also as a way of showing compassion, because after all, we're in these bodies that are designed to do some really amazing things. So the understanding of misogi is if you give your body a test, and the trick is you're supposed to come up with something to do at which there is at least a 50% chance that you'll fail.
Which is a pretty high percentage.
Which is a high percentage,
yeah,
right?
That's pretty high.
So you're creating this test for yourself. And the thing is, in the end, it turns out it doesn't matter if you succeed or fail. There's something about the doing of it that the brain likes, the mind likes, even the body likes. And I think when people train for something, they get a good sense of this, some physical activity. But I read about these 3 men who wanted to create a misogi exercise together. So they were all underwater divers. So they decided to move 80-pound rocks from one part of a bay to another part of the bay just because that's what they thought about.
That was their challenge to themselves.
And I'm not even sure whether they finished this thing, but they did say that while they were doing it, they had this just great feeling of being engaged in something. Like their bodies were fully engaged, their minds. And in the end, their bodies thanked them for it. Their minds thank them for it. But you've got to also, it makes the point that you can't hurt yourself doing this.
Yeah. No, I like that.
So,
we don't want a 50% of death. We
That's
want 50%
right.
of
No.
failing.
We want a good Masoji exercise here.
Yeah.
But I just think it's interesting because sometimes people like to stretch themselves a little bit. And that's a good thing. It can be memorizing something.
Yeah.
Something that's really out of our comfort zone. That's a good challenge, a healthy challenge.
And with that, we want to do something I'm calling Goal for the Week. If my graphic will show up. Come on, graphic. There we go. Yay.
Look at that.
Graphic. So
Congratulations.
goals for the week. Thank you so much. It finally worked. So the idea behind it is that we kind of have a little theme, and this was, yes, completely inspired by Heather's YouTube Huddle Up, where she has we have goals and wins, and that's for creators. She does a beautiful thing with stickers. It's super cool. But for us, I thought we could make a goal based on sort of what we're talking about this week.
Mm-hmm.
So for us today, I would love for you guys to write in the comments if you're comfortable doing so, or just write on maybe on a Post-it note. I don't know about you. I've always had Post-it notes flying around. Post-it note for yourself, stick it on the fridge, stick it on your desk, of what's something you could do this week of which you have a 50% chance of success. What thing can we do to stretch ourselves that would be an act of self-compassion or a challenge? So there's a lot of room for variables in the goals for the week, for sure. We want you to find what works for you. Do you have one?
I'm thinking.
You're thinking. I have one because I obviously came up with this. So I was like, I better have something. So while you guys are there's a lag with the video and the comments. So I'm stalling while you guys are typing yours. So mine, so it should make you feel a little, mine is actually to film a solo video for small churches doing tech setups.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So definitely, I would say more than 50% chance of failure on that one, but I'm going to try. Because I was thinking about that. I feel like I watch and consume a lot of tech media, and it's its own full-time job. And I was thinking there's probably a lot of people out there like myself who are like directors of music who don't want to watch 1,700 hours of tech videos, even though I highly recommend Tom Buck and Heather Ramirez. They're great. But if you don't have time, that would be my goal. What about you?
Well, I've got a thing, but I'm going to make a comment just about this, the sort of pass-fail dimension of this.
Yes.
It turns out that if we're not really great at self-compassion, which many of us are not, that in fact, even choosing something that seems fairly simple may have a fairly high chance of failure with it because we're not used to doing it.
Right.
Right. So even if we say, I'm going to take 2 minutes at 7 p.m. each evening to breathe deeply.
Love it.
And consciously, there's probably a 50% chance I'll fail at that because I'm not used to doing it.
Sure.
Right? So with any new activity, building any new habit, it's wobbly at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. But I do think because your term that you used earlier about being lost in something, when you really when I am really in the middle of a great book, I feel lost and I actually feel energy coming into my body. So I've been trying to read the book, The Overstory, which is a fabulous book, gotten a little stuck. So I think as an act of self-compassion, I'm going to give myself about 10 minutes each evening, some point after 7 p.m. So I'm going to start modestly, but I know even there, it may not work, to get back into the book, The Overstory.
I love that. I love that a lot. That feels very compassionate.
I hope so.
Yourself. Tom says, I would like to try and do a bit less each day. Can I take yours? I like yours a lot, Tom. I love that. That's fantastic.
That may be the default option.
That's great. Let's all just try to do that, shall we? William, I'm hoping to finish acoustically treating my basement this week. It's been a goal every week for a couple of months. Yes, I've had tasks like that too. Good luck with that, William. I hope you'll come back next week and let us know how it goes.
Yeah.
That sounds exciting and really fun. We still have to do that in this space. There's a fire marshal thing I have to work with because this is obviously a church building. Susan says, connect with at least one woman friend. I love that. Connecting with friends right now is tough.
Yeah.
Tough.
And
Tough
it feels
stuff.
good when it happens.
Oh, so good. I love that, Susan. Thank you. Nancy, with you on the overstory. I'm at the point where the two people are sitting in the tree. Need to get past that. I don't get the
We're gonna
reference,
make it.
but I'm assuming you do.
There might be a support group for those reading the book.
You can do it, guys. I believe in you. Oh gosh, thank you all so much. So for those who didn't have a chance to write in, or you're holding them to yourselves, absolutely no problem. You are in our thoughts and our prayers this week, and we encourage you and all you do. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
For our very first live stream. I can understand now why people live stream for like 2 hours, because it's been 32 minutes already.
Thanks to everyone for your comments, your presence. It really is. It's a great opportunity to connect.
Absolutely. Oh, I told you there's a lag, so sorry about this, Julia. I want to do my calligraphy mantras every day this week. I love that.
Great.
I hope you have so much fun. So thank you all so much, and we will see you back here next Monday at noon Eastern. Thank you for joining us for Lunchtime Live.
Be well.